like to introduce Cherilyn Egar. Many of you are familiar with her on the political front. She is a former candidate for the U.S. Senate. Ran a successful campaign, but not successful enough. Been very active with political issues, promoting the family, promoting women's rights. Got very strong opinions on the UN, I believe, as I recall hearing you speak. But I'll turn the time over to Cherilyn, and we thank her for coming up here and to discuss the caucuses.
I just want to thank you all for coming out this evening, and I'm so glad to be here with you. I wanted to give you a little bit of an update. You know, he mentioned that I ran for office, and it was a journey that was totally a life-changing experience for me. I learned so much, and so grateful for so many people who came out to support. But when I was a little girl, I was playing piano in my very first piano concert, and I knew this song backwards and forwards. I could play it with my eyes closed, and I sat down at the piano bench. My knees were shaking, my fingers were shaking, and I started, and I played a wrong chord. 5 tries later, my desperate mother whispered loudly to me from the audience, "Just go on." And I did. I went on to become a singer instead. But you know, that's life, right? We have these experiences, and sometimes it doesn't work out for us, but we just go on, right? We can't let it stop us. And those 3 words have been very important throughout my life. And losing an election was really, I mean, I would have loved to have won, but it was more of a learning experience for me, having gone through that. And so, I am not running for office. I am back to what I've always done, which is a lot of research on a lot of the issues. And this is one of them, and I'm just grateful to be able to be here and answer any questions that you have. And so I may take a few sips of my green water here and maybe a cough drop or two, so I hope you'll bear with me. I do want to share some of my personal thoughts on where we're at in general, because in my perspective, what's happening with our caucus system is part of a bigger picture of what's going on in our country altogether. And it's called Count My Vote. We believe it's more by my vote. And so this evening, this is what we're going to discuss. First of all, what is the neighborhood caucus? And you all know because you've been involved. But I'll bet many of your neighbors don't. And so I hope that I can provide some good resources. Is this microphone bothering you? It keeps going in and out. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about who's who in this, who's for, who's against, and some of the myths surrounding it, so that you will know when you hear people say, "Oh, I think we ought to get rid of the caucus system because, you know, it's just too restrictive, doesn't allow enough people to participate, and it just elects extremists." All these things we'll talk about. And then we'll give you some good positive reasons why we need to preserve this unique system. And I just want you to know that when I was running for office, I was in Washington, D.C. several times, and I had an opportunity to speak to hundreds of people who represent organizations and people on the Hill in different settings. And every time I said to them, Utah has the best election system of every state in this union, and your state needs one too. So I really promoted this even before this was even challenged. And then we'll end with the action plan. Is that, okay. So So I had an interesting experience earlier this fall. I got a text message from a longtime friend of mine who lives in Connecticut, and she and her husband immigrated to the United States from the Soviet Union about 3 years after the wall came down. And this text was very simple. She said, "I need your help. I think I need to homeschool my daughter." Now this is another topic, but not really, because I called her and we had a 2-hour conversation. And I wrote down copious notes. And the reason I have Tweedledum and Tweedledee up here is because this is exactly what she said. She said the United States is starting to look a lot like the Soviet Union that we left behind. And I said, "How so?" And she described things such as bureaucracy, a government that's full of agencies and commissions and boards who are unelected by the people, and a loss of local representative government. Now, although she was concerned about education, she was saying, no, we're tying education to the workforce. That's exactly what we did in the Soviet Union. And another thing is combining private money with public money in what's called public-private partnerships, P3s. And she said that is what allowed Stalin to come in and actually take over private industry. And so she sees all these things happening. But the bottom line is, she said it's all about consolidation of power and centralization for the purpose of controlling. And why am I saying this about what this challenge is to our caucus system? Because if you look at what the caucus does, it is really the government closest to us, to our neighbors, to our families, to our homes. And what is being recommended to replace it is a broadening, more of a consolidation and a centralization, and removing that local voice that we now have, that other states have abandoned.
Every 2 years, you and your neighbors come together in a meeting called a caucus to vote for those who will best represent you. These representatives are called delegates because they are delegated the responsibility of researching the candidates. For example, John, your friendly, trusted neighbor, has always been there for you and serves in the community as your delegate. Opponents of the caucus system label citizens like John as extreme. False. In reality, the individuals elected as your delegates are your respected neighborhood leaders, like John. To be elected as a delegate, you must receive a majority of the vote. This ensures the views of the majority are represented. Maybe you've heard that your vote doesn't count. False. You vote for your friend John, or perhaps you are elected as a delegate to represent your neighborhood. Your voice is heard through empowering delegates you know, trust, and can converse with. The caucus system allows you to get on with your life, while John worries about the politics. The delegates you select are charged with the task of thoroughly interviewing candidates for office. For this reason, Utah is the best managed state. What about the rumor that primary elections increase participation? False. The caucus system requires candidates to speak directly to voters. In primary elections, candidates are required to reach tens of thousands of people in a very short period of time. Because this is impossible, candidates are required to raise large sums of money, making them accountable to lobbyists instead of you. Candidates then turn to political consultants, paying them large sums of money to get their political message out through TV ads, automated phone calls, and junk mail. Utah experimented with the direct primary system from 1937 to 1947, which marked the end of a disastrous decade in Utah politics. During this time, the populace dumped the primary system when voter turnout declined to only 10%. Increasing the difficulty for a candidate to win at convention results in more power and influence for those who profit off of our elections. Preserve our traditions and protect your local neighborhood caucus.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in this challenge and who's who behind it. about almost a year ago, when we first started hearing that there was going to be a challenge, I started doing research, and I found some interesting connections of people. And these were the names that first appeared when they had to report just recently on who is contributing. And now you're in Weber County, and I would consider Weber County to be it is one of the larger counties delegate-wise, but it also could be considered more just outside of the Wasatch Front, you know, the central locations of Salt Lake City, where a lot of things happen for the state. And if you look at this list, where is most of the money coming from?
Salt Lake.
Right, and then there are a few out of state. If you'll notice some Virginia, those are lobbyists. And also business owners. And then here's some itemized expenditures of this group. And you'll see here, this was mostly to set up their messaging for what they were about to present to the public. And so you'll look at some names here, the Exoro Group and Y2 Analytics. Y2 Analytics is a company that is in part founded by a BYU professor, and Exoro Group is LeVar Webb's group. And they are political consultants. LeVar does media consulting and public relations and websites and so forth. So when I started researching what was coming to us in the State Central Committee, of which I'm a member, and in the Republican Party, it's a group of about 200 people that are elected by the county parties, and they represent the counties at the state level, and they primarily are involved with the administrative aspects of the party. And of course, this is one of them, what's going to happen to the caucus. So right before one of our meetings, I believe it was last January, we got an email from the party chairman, and it included some of the agenda items, and in it was an attachment that was about a 26-page legal brief that had been put together by a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. called Kaplan and Drysdale. Kirk Jowers is the picture that you see right now, and he is the director of the Hinckley Institute at the University of Utah, but he also is an attorney with Kaplan and Drysdale in D.C. And for several years, he has been promoting getting rid of the caucus system. So he's using his lobbyist resources in Washington, D.C. to bring this about. This is LeVar Webb with Exoro Group. And this is Doug Wright. He's KSL. And between the three of them, they have been using the media to their best interest over the past few years to put a negative spin on the caucus system. Many lies are being told through this man, Doug Wright. I wrote a blog post on my website, CherilynEgar.com, and it was, is it time for Doug Wright to retire? And I think I got his attention because I got a phone call from an attorney that told me I had to take the little snippets from his radio show off my blog site. So I called my attorney and I asked him about it. He said, no, you don't, because it's not the entire show, it's just that segment. And so I kept it up there. And anyway, I thought it would be good for him to either retire or go on a mission or something. And this is Mike Levitt. Now, he's the poster boy, but there's a relationship between these folks. LeVar Webb has been Mike Levitt's political consultant in his campaigns. And of course, Mike Levitt is now also a lobbyist. You see, old politicians don't die. They just become lobbyist. This is a picture, just so you know what Kaplan and Drysdale is. That's a fairly principle-less, typical lobby firm in Washington that represents both sides of the aisle. They don't really care, it's just about money. And so the gentleman that you see in the corner of the picture is the lead attorney on this challenge in Utah. And the other guy there is listening to Mr. Stephen Colbert, because this is the lobby firm that set up Stephen Colbert's super PAC that ridiculed and mocked Republican candidates throughout that whole campaign. And so they also are a very powerful firm in DC that has represented Democrats. They represented the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law that of course favors people like McCain who have a lot of money, and the rest of us have to be limited to $2,500. So that's the kind of lobbying firm we're looking at. And then there is this gentleman, John Huntsman, and it's interesting that this law firm is now the one that set up his PAC too, in preparation for perhaps a run again. And I don't know if you watched him during the election cycle, but he was very disappointing, to say the least. And in fact, I felt at times he belonged on the other side of the aisle. And in fact, I think he did criticize the Republican Party and indicate that he might, in fact, do that. So, and then I have this gentleman's picture up here, Karl Rove, because going back in history, politics has changed a lot. We used to have conventions where you would actually go there and fight over who was going to be the nominee. Well, after Reagan was elected, that went away. And I place the blame at the feet of this man. They call him the architect, but he is actually the destroyer of everything good in the Republican Party. He was the one that was working, I don't know if you remember the big controversy when Reagan was running. He was ready to get the nomination, but he had to cut a deal, right? Had to cut a deal that George Bush would be his running mate. And this was the man who was behind that deal. And so he changed politics because he figured out how to use the media soundbite. As television really came of age, and that is how he's made his money, is through media soundbites. And he's in every nook and cranny in every state. And I'm not saying that he's directly involved in this challenge, but the challenge is between you and me and big media and the big money that they make if they go to primary, if they can get around having all the decisions made in a very small group of people, where we have more say and where anybody can come out and participate in that process. They don't make any money off that, much, okay? They make it off of getting the media on TV, radio, and to the larger audiences. So this is to their advantage. This is a gentleman in DC who is, well, he's actually a BYU graduate, but he is in biotech industry, and he has put a lot of money into this. This graph here is actually showing how much money he makes. Well, it's not showing the money, but it's showing, this is from his company's website. He does procurement for government contracts. And so every time government grows, his business grows. So that's what this graph is showing. And I just think it's interesting that all these people are really in this to grow government. and to get people in that will help them grow government. And this is another gentleman who lives here. He's an entrepreneur, venture capitalist. And they're all in this for the same reason. There's something to be gained by having more moderate candidates, more big government people. Fred Lampropoulos is a big donor of this, and I ran a survey a couple of years ago when I was running for office of all of the delegates to find out where they stood on the caucus, and that is where I first learned. I thought I was doing a blind survey, but it ended up having everybody's names attached to it. I didn't mean for that to happen, it was a mistake, but anyway. He was one of the ones there that wanted to get rid of the caucus, along with Enoch Green, and so it took a while for that to come out. His brother-in-law is our former Republican Party chairman, Thomas Wright. And this one was an interesting one because I have learned that over the years, people in business want to do good things. They want to put their money in good places. They listen to their friends. I'm not saying that Gail Miller is a bad person, because she's certainly done a lot of wonderful things, and her husband was an extraordinary man and really did stand up for some difficult conservative causes during his lifetime. But somebody got to her, and she has funded more than anybody now, $125,000. That's my phone ringing. Okay. So what are they saying? They're saying Utah should be more like what? Colorado, Connecticut, and California. Has anyone in the room ever lived in any of these states before? Which? California?
Colorado, California.
Colorado?
Colorado,
Yes?
California.
What?
Colorado and California.
Okay. And I have lived in Connecticut. So tell me what you thought of the election process in California.
Well,
Yes.
the ones on the coast win. I mean, nobody else, most of the conservatives are inland,
Mm.
and so they don't get a voice. It just doesn't work.
Okay, you have a flyover system.
Yeah.
Okay. Colorado?
Well, Colorado and California. I grew up in California, so I guess it was natural. But I can see this is much more benefits for the lower level with representation. Instead of, like you said, it's all mass media, it's all name recognition or advertising and image, not reality.
And how much do those races cost?
Oh, yeah, you can't even start.
Millions.
Bart
50
Fox?
million for a Senate race, more. Did you know that Mike Lee and I came into that convention pretty much equal in what we had spent? We both spent about 150,000. I mean, that's pretty extraordinary. And then, when Mike Lee went on, I think, all told, he didn't spend more than maybe 2 million, I don't know. It was pretty low cost. That's still a lot. But that's the advantage of having our system, one of the advantages. But something you should know about California also is that they have a system where whoever, doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, whoever the top two are that get through primary, they've opened primaries, you can cross over. Those are the two that get on the ballot. So in a lot of areas in California, if it's very Democrat, your top two are going to both be Democrats. So you get to choose between two Democrats if you're a Republican. How do you like that? All right. I had an interesting conversation with a party leader in Connecticut where I used to live. And I know a lot about that system, and I think it probably surprised some people in the state central committee when I stood up and said I've actually lived in Connecticut, and I'm probably the only one in the room that has ever been a witness, a key witness, at the Connecticut Supreme Court on election law reform. And I'll tell you what happens in Connecticut. You can petition to get on the ballot. It's called a dual system, where if you don't get through the convention as a Republican, you can petition to get on the ballot. And so, what happens is you get a lot of people on a ballot in a primary, but there's only one that is the quote endorsed Republican candidate. And so when I was talking to this woman, I said, so what happens in those primaries? Do people win by majority? And she said, well, no, typically, it's a plurality vote, which means you have so many people on the ballot, it's dividing it out. And so you can get somebody elected to be the nominee and they don't even have a majority. Happens in California too. And then the other thing that happens in Connecticut with this system is that if you petition to get on a ballot, I think you have to get 5% of the number of people that voted in that party. You have to get in each county. Well, they don't have counties in Connecticut. They have counties, but I mean they do it by townships. And so, I'll tell you what happens. There's a lot of fraud, and because people will try to get as many names on those petitions as they possibly can, and it's very costly because when you have to be verifying tens of thousands of names of voters, who's doing that? Your county clerk is doing that, right? So it's going to cost a ton of money even to move to that sort of a system. And now maybe some of you don't like the idea of having a two-party system. And I'm not suggesting that I'm promoting that, but I am suggesting if there are parties, does it not make sense that those parties stand for something, number one, and number two, have candidates running that represent what those parties stand for. And so, when you adopt a system like this, that completely undermines that. And the party loses the control over what they believe in or what they stand for. It's something that I'm very concerned about. Now, on our side of this issue, those that want to preserve it, we really have an interesting mix of people that have come forward to work together. Yes, there's the Tea Party, all right, and conservative Republicans, and there's the Utah Democratic Party is working with us. It's a bipartisan group. Jim DeBackus, who is in the Senate, Democrat, was their party chairman. He's working with us, and this is a great guy who's been helping, and he's with the Log Cabin Republicans. So it's a very broad-based group. A couple of days ago, Bob Bennett had an opinion editorial in the paper, and I just had to debate with you on this. He doesn't know I'm debating him, but that's all right. Caucus delegates do not always honor commitments to public. Dang! Isn't that why we unelected him? Wow. Okay, so here's what he said. He says that the delegates should be elected before the filing deadlines. Now, this is audience participation time. What could be good or what could be bad about that? Yes.
Well, you don't know who the candidates are.
Okay, so would that be a good or bad thing?
Both.
Okay, Linda?
It could be bad in the way that you get delegates that say, I want to vote for so-and-so. The purpose of becoming a delegate is to go vet all of the candidates.
Thank you. Yes.
The problem there, you would get shill delegates that just really represent, they're on the inside with someone like Bennett, and they're going to go there for that purpose, to go vote for Bennett and nothing else. So you wouldn't have an open-minded person who might say, well, I support Bennett, and then they go, you know what, I'm going to change my mind, I support Mike Lee instead. And that's what he didn't like, but that's how it should be.
Okay, good comments all. The purpose of being a delegate is definitely to vet all of the candidates. when you are a candidate running for office, your goal is to get as many delegates elected that are committed to you. You see what's happening? So, I can attest that that's not such a bad thing. However, if we elected the delegates before the filing deadline, what Bob Bennett is saying is that they would be more apt to be just what we said, to be vetting all of the candidates. They wouldn't already be committed. Really? Not so certain that that would not be aiding the incumbent, would it not? The incumbent already knows he's in office, or she, and so it gives them more time, more of an opportunity to get their delegates in ahead of time. We would just be extending the length of that election cycle, really, in my view. That's, to me, what human nature would be doing there. So, we don't have any one perfect system, but here's the second point. Vote the way they promise on caucus night. That's what Bob Bennett thinks should happen. Vote the way they promise on caucus night. Now,
Might as well have a direct primary then.
okay, how many of you have gone to your caucuses before and run for delegate? All right, tell me what you have done. Have you gone there going in knowing you support a particular candidate and it's do or die that candidate? Or have you gone in there really wanting to see who all the candidates are and study them out? Raise your hands if it's second, that one. Okay, and then how many of you have gone in pretty certain who you think the best person is? Okay, good.
Well,
Yeah,
I was pretty certain I wanted Hatch out.
okay.
That's why.
Anybody but, yeah? All right, yes.
I was certain I wanted Bob Bennett out, or I wanted Hatch out. So it wasn't so much I had the replacement picked out at that point, but we knew we had to replace the guy that was in there.
Right.
So we went in, at least I think most of us went in open-minded with who was challenging.
So you see why Bob Bennett didn't like this system? Because there were that many people there that he knew going in, and he said about 70% were against him. Oh, actually, that was when he was running for Senate the first time against, not Chris, but Joe Cannon in '92. He said 70% were against him going in, and they had some work to do. And so they converted enough people that he got into the primary, and then he eventually won. So really, he should kind of like that system. Don't you think? That's what got him elected. All right. But there's a reason why. Oh, and might I say, if you are a delegate, or you're elected, or you're running for a delegate in a caucus, and the room of people says to you, we want to know who it is you're supporting. So you have to declare who you're supporting, and that you are going to promise, this is an and/or, after you're elected, you're going to promise to support what the majority in this room wants you to support. Now, how do you do that on a caucus night before any of the candidates have gotten out there to really, so that you can get to know them? That's an unfair position for your neighbors to put you in my view. And so if you ever run for delegate again, this is what I've always done. And many times I've been pretty clear on who I think the candidates are because I've gotten to know them even before we get to caucus. But I've always said it is my job as a delegate to vet these candidates out. I cannot promise to you this evening who it is that I am going to vote for, but I do promise you that I will get to know each one of them very well, and I will vote for the person that best stands for limited government, principled leadership, and fiscal restraint. That's it, and I've gotten elected every time. So, keep that in mind. Vote the way the majority want them to vote. That, we just talked about that. That's something that he thinks should happen. Cast a public vote and be accountable to those they represent. Now there again, I have to say, physician, heal thyself. You know, it's like, what did he do while he was in office? No, he wasn't a bit accountable to us. He was accountable to the lobbyists. So what do you think about delegates having to cast a public vote?
What exactly does that mean? So instead of a ballot,
Secret ballot.
secret ballot, so that everybody knows what your vote is? I don't mind.
Well, takes away freedom of those who want to switch to the minority candidate, you know.
It'd be a lot of pressure, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah.
And we have state legislation that protects a private ballot.
I think for some people, like myself, I want to be accountable for those, but to protect those situations should probably be a private vote. But how do you protect it from somebody cheating or, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
I didn't like the electronic balloting at the convention. If I weren't a delegate, I'd still be there to see how my delegate voted by raising his hand, and you can't tell, really. If they're just doing like that, I was sitting next to Clark, and I didn't know when he was voting, and I didn't like that. I just didn't. Now, my stand-in was there too. He didn't know how I was voting.
Have any of you been a national delegate for the Republican Party or any party? Anybody who has will tell you, because they do cast their votes and they do know who's voting, aye or nay or whatever. I have been told that there is extraordinary pressure put on delegates, and it is vicious. And you have to be very, very solid in your principles, and I'm not sure. Now, you see what our elected officials go through in Washington when they're casting their votes, and they have all these lobbyists, you know, giving them money to do it. So, anyway, just something to think about. All right, now, here's some of the myths from Count My Vote. The low voter turnout. I'm going to show you some statistics that we have here. Utah voter turnout compared to the U.S. and one-party dominated state. You see, what the other side is comparing is apples and oranges. We have to look at other states so they're similar to ours, because we are one-party dominated. And this shows Utah versus the U.S. versus Hawaii. And you can see that we're not so bad, really. And there are some similarities. In 2004, for example, we were about equal with the national statistics. And so then look at this next one. This is in the general election, 2000 turnout in one-party dominated states. There we are. So Count My Vote wants us to believe that we're the worst in the nation. Okay, we're really not. And here's another one. This is 2004. Here we are again, and 2008. Now there are reasons for lower turnout. And this was the 2012 primary turnout. There we are. And there we were in the general. So what can you imagine different reasons are for low voter turnout? Do you think there's a difference in an election year when it's a presidential election and the off year in turnout? Absolutely. Lower voter turnout. What are some other factors that you think can come into play?
You hear a choice of candidates, that people just are discouraged.
Okay, if you notice back there in 2008, I'll go back. Well, I'd have to, let's see, here we go. In 2008, here on this chart, it's the second bar from the left. Notice how it's lower. That's an election year. Why do you think it was lower? What was going on by the time election day came?
Utah can't swing that election probably.
Yeah, a lot of voters feel like, it doesn't make any difference. Plus, by then, McCain had just really botched it up royally, and people were just like, who cares? But there's another factor here in Utah, and that is a couple of them. Because we are a one-party state, and it is Republican, and most of us are Republican, there's a false illusion that everything's okay. That, well, we're going to have good candidates because most of them are Republican, right? So people tend to stay home. And the other factor is a cultural factor having to do with busy, busy, busy families and large families and very involved in not only the school activities but also church activities. A lot of times the voting piece tends to get the last priority and all of that. All right, they also are saying that it's the most restrictive system. Now, I want to show you what we learned from some of our research. At the convention, we were debating what the threshold would be. Should we move to 70% at the convention, 67%, which would be 2/3 supermajority, or 60%? And what we found is that the number of times that a candidate moved to a primary versus the number of times they were nominated right there at the convention was about 50-50. So we believed that that was a pretty even Steven sort of balance. If you really wanted to have balance, that would be it. Well, I tend to personally believe that we should just do 50 plus 1%, but that's just me. And then they're saying that it's exclusionary and unfair. I want to take just a minute here to give some history on our founders. Now, there were some comments to Bob Bennett's article. You have to go read some of those comments. Some of them are the most ignorant comments I've ever read, what people believe. Anyway, the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government. So what is that? We know it's got checks and balances, right? But before the 12th Amendment, this is what it was. In elections, there was a vertical check and balance. The president was elected only by electors. There were 530, well, if it were today, back then it was, 100 something, I think. But today, if we still had it today, there would be 535 people electing the president. Now think of this as a board of directors. All right, and you have your executive group, the board, and of course we have the cabinet for the president, right? That's all under the executive. And if you've ever been on a board of directors, this makes total sense to me. Not everybody has voting rights to elect those people in a major corporation, right? So this is how they set it up. And then the Senate was elected by the state legislatures only. In Utah, we have 104. So today, 104 people would be electing the senators. Then the House was the People's House. That was the only branch of government that was elected, became how we elect the president. An electoral college is now not what it was before. It's not the equivalent. The old electoral college was the equivalent of the number of people in the federal delegation. So it would be, for Utah, we have 4 congressmen and 2 senators, so 6 electors. Okay, it's different now. It's done totally different. And watch what happens here. Okay, the Senate was still the state legislature. And then the House was still the people's house. But you see how it suddenly gave more power to the people to elect the president. After the 17th Amendment, which got rid of the legislature voting for the Senate, this is what it looked like. So what just happened? We actually have turned into a democracy. Now, it's not a pure direct democracy because we still have representatives, but nevertheless, that's what's happened. And that is what has moved us to this consolidation control power. And so when the count my vote people are saying we need to have a less restrictive system, and we need to allow more people to be voting, then that is what they're saying. They want democracy. Does that make sense? Okay. The State Central Committee took some action to try to fix some things that could be fixed, and certainly there are a lot of things that could be done better. And these are some of the areas that we voted on with resolutions to move forward on. So we are now calling it the neighborhood, we just call it the neighborhood election, because we feel that that's really what it is. It's a neighborhood election. Precincts, we hope, will have websites, and we will be able to allow delegates to pre-file and to have their information up on that website so their neighborhoods can look at it in advance. We're proposing a meet and greet to get to know all the delegates right before the caucus meeting, and electronic check-ins so that it won't take so long, with also pre-registration, and the same-day ballot and a military mission ballot. Okay? The other side is also saying it's the least accountable to voters. Well, and as part of that, that our system only elects extremists. Let's look at the history. All right, in almost every single case here that I'm going to show you, this is Joe Cannon with Bob Bennett in 1992. They went to a primary. Joe was first in the convention, and Bob Bennett was second, but Bob Bennett won the primary. Okay? Now, would you call Joe Cannon an extremist? Raise your hand. Okay? Let's look at this one, right? This is Rick Egar and Mike Lovett. The same thing happened there, okay? Now, I don't have all of them, but it could go on and on. And so Mike Levitt got through the primary, and I want you to consider here why this is. Why did Bob Bennett go second in the convention, but first in the primary? Why did Mike Levitt take second at a convention and first in the primary? Okay, here's another one. This is Nolan Karras and John Huntsman. Same thing happened there. All right? And then this one is the anomaly. We have Chris Cannon, who made it through the convention, just squeaked through by, I think, about 9 votes is all. They went to a primary, and the underdog, Jason Chaffetz, actually won it. So what do you think it was in all of those instances where the second place guy actually won the primary? Yes?
Media money.
There you go, media money. Okay?
Is that true though in Chaffetz's case?
In Chaffetz's case, there was a lot of anger going on at that time, especially on the immigration issue. It was not working for Chris. I was very involved in that whole thing that was happening. And the other thing is, who was the better media candidate in that? Do you think? Absolutely. Chris is a good guy, he just couldn't put two words together quite as well as Jason Chaffetz could. So he was the better media candidate. Always in a primary, the best media candidate is likely to win.
And
right?
Jason his campaign put a lot of boots on the ground. A
And
lot.
yes, that is true. All right. And then, look at this one. Same thing happened. All right, Bridgewater eked ahead in the convention and then lost. Why? Who had better name recognition? Do you think?
Really, neither of them.
There you go. Yeah, again, Lee came out looking better, sounding better in those media sound bites, and that's what happens in primaries. And I'm not saying, actually, I think Lee's doing a great job. I think I don't know what Tim would have done, but he's doing a good job. Okay, then we've got this one. And, of course, the guy with the money one, right? Now, if you look at all of these, though, mostly when you get to the primary, you're going to find that the guy also with the name ID, the name recognition, is going to win the day. That is why Bob Bennett wants primaries. That is why they all want primaries, because if they have money and name ID, they know they can win it. Okay? Most likely. All right, here we go with the reasons that we want to preserve this caucus. Look, we, according to the Pew survey, have the best managed state in the nation. All right? We could maybe contend on some little problems that are inherent in every state, but nevertheless, we're doing better, debt factors and everything else, than others under this system, because we've elected good people. The second thing is, this is the only system where you can bring the trusted friends and neighbors together to counter the big money special interests. It is grassroots, and it is not elite cliques that are grooming candidates. Now, some of that does happen, but it's because of the grassroots that can offset that. You don't have to be wealthy, excuse me, or famous or wealthy. Okay? In this system, you can win with ideas, good ideas versus money and sound bites. And by the way, because I have worked on some campaigns from behind the scenes, this really does happen. Sometimes you know the candidate really well and you know the flaws, and certainly I was a flawed candidate, but it's often, you don't see that when it's just, when you're seeing them only in a commercial, okay? This is really important. In this system, we are not flyover in this state. I'm telling you, there's a configuration in the state of Utah. I knew that the rural counties were really important to my winning. In fact, I knew that if I could get more rural interests, that would be better for our state. Why is that? Because so many of our resources are in our rural counties, and that's what's being held up right now. So, without the caucus system, what's everybody going to focus on?
Salt Lake City.
And isn't it interesting, that is what is showing in the money that's backing this Count My Vote. All right, no flyover rural. And this is what it looks like in our current electoral college for the presidential election. And you can see how there's little Utah, but what if that turned into popular vote? We'd be course, Utah was not flyover in the Romney campaign, did you notice? All right. So this is our state now with our new boundaries. And you notice that the 4th district there, that's where, of course, that's Wasatch Front, that's where the consolidation and most population is. So, but those other areas are going to be neglected. 7, accountability to individual citizens versus special interests. There we are in our caucus room, and we can speak our minds, but this is what we're up against. Oftentimes it is David and Goliath, but honestly, I've been in so many campaigns on issues, you wouldn't believe when we're up at the legislature. The last session, I was there all but 4 days, and I cannot tell you how important it was to have folks like you and others come there and write notes to your legislators. Be there to talk to them, because that offsets the big money oftentimes. It's really extraordinary on the local level how much influence we can have. All right, so we're at the end of this presentation on some things that need to happen. We have a petition. I didn't see it on neighborhoodelection.com, but I know that there's a petition on fairelectionsutah.com. Okay, do you have any questions? This is a list of things that are needed at this time. And we have, I took a picture at one of the Larry H. Miller cinemas. That is one place where you're going to see a table with a Count My Vote banner. So we were there at Thanksgiving Point a couple of weeks ago, and there were the 2 people sitting, they're paid, right? These are paid people that sit there to get people to sign their ballot initiative petition. And not many are, just lining up to sign. I don't know what their count is. Do you know, Linda?
No.
We don't know yet, but we do know that our people have been there to help talk to other people and let them know about what this is about, and we've been able to convince people not to sign it. So if you are at a movie theater, Larry H. Miller movie theater, that is where the tables will be, and if you're able to talk to people and just tell them don't sign that would do a world of
But
good.
be polite.
Be polite. Always, yes.
Do you know what they need to get this on the ballot, signature-wise?
Oh boy, I've forgotten. It's a certain percent of every county.
Like approximately 102,000
Yeah.
or something.
And that's why we're focusing a lot on the rural counties, because those are the counties that are going to really suffer. And we know that they'll be able to get, probably enough of their petition signers in Salt Lake County, but they have to be able to get it in the rural counties as well. And so if you're on my email list, you'll get that information of when we're going to be having those discussions. And I want to thank you, Clark, for inviting me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.